Hi everyone, I'm Krylios, Team Rayceen Productions MC and producer. And joining me today, as usual, is the wonderful Rayceen Pendarvis. Hello, Rayceen. How are you?
Hello, greetings and salutations to all.
Of course, and we have our wonderful guest here with us today, DC Councilmember Mary Cheh, and I'm so glad to have Mary Cheh with us today. Hello, Councilmember, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I hope everybody virtually is and really is fine as well. Uh,
Yes.
you gave me an instruction. I don't know if I violated, but
Just a little bit, just a little bit.
okay,
But I grabbed it back just in time. I grabbed it back
okay,
just
okay,
in
okay.
time.
Sorry about
No
Well, hi,
problem. No
yeah,
problem.
so we'll just kind of, keep it fun and lighting and just a few
that.
questions for people who want to know. With
Sure.
the city and how we're handling the pandemic, we're in quite a few phases of reopening, and people are like, where do we go from here and how are we affecting that? And if we get a surge of new cases, will we go back to phase one, or how will that happen, or what is the plan for that?
Well, right now we're in phase two, and I don't see going to phase three anytime, very soon. Um, Under phase two, businesses were allowed to open in terms of, allowing certain numbers of people to come in. And these are businesses beyond um, the grocery stores and things of that nature, the essential ones. But there are still limits. One limit is, of course, no more than 50 people can gather. Bars can't be open, and bars have been a real problem in some other jurisdictions where young people gather and without masks, etc. And even just today, the mayor enhanced the limitations in this phase by saying that masks are now going to be required in public. Required in public. Before this, the masks were required if you went indoors, like you went into a grocery store, or you were in a common area in a public building. Um, and and the mayor, and I want to give her, kudos here, because I think she's been handling this very carefully and very cautiously and very well. And council members and others have been asking her, well, why don't you, since masks and social distancing are so key to preventing the spread of the virus, why don't we go for a mandatory mask rule? And she had so far resisted that, in part because what she did not want, we want strong encouragement, messaging, but what she did not want was unnecessary encounters by whatever kind of law enforcement there may be, or some such things like that. And so I think she wanted to see, can we achieve our goals without actually making it mandatory? But today she said she's going to issue an order, probably today, tomorrow, the next couple of days. But there's really not going to be, the kind of enforcement. We're not sending out, police or something to enforce, but it's I think to, make the message more powerful. So we're in phase two, and that's where we're going to stay. And I think if you look at our statistics relative, even to the jurisdictions around us, but certainly some of those, forgive me, nutty places where they're denying that it's anything. You have a governor who caught COVID, but still says, no, we're not going to have any particular rules about this. And just today, maybe you saw it in the Washington Post, there was a comparison of Arizona and New Mexico. New Mexico has maintained its limits, okay? And yet its economy hasn't suffered, because that's always been the tension. Oh, people,
Yeah.
but it's not true. So in fact, they've been able to contain the spread and open up in a responsible way. Whereas Arizona, it was like, go ahead, open up, and no real protections. They're in big trouble. They're a hot spot. So we're in phase two. I don't think we're quite ready to go to phase three yet. We've done some things for our businesses. I put in one of the emergencies, for example, that if a restaurant, because you can eat outdoors, And there's
Mhm.
some minimal eating indoors, but eating outdoors. So now you can apply to DDOT for a permit to use the public space. So you can extend on the sidewalk. You can even, if it's blocked off, go into, the parking lane. You can go into alleys, though I don't know who wants to eat in an alley, but nevertheless, you can use the public space and you can get a permit on an expedited basis. And that permit can include not just, what you want to do with the public space, but it can also include, your permitting from DCRA and your permitting from ABRA, so that if you have a liquor license, you can serve liquor outdoors. This is a way
Ah,
to try to make it more, to make it possible for these restaurants to survive, other than just with takeout. So, and we've done lots of other things to try to mitigate, the serious harms that are out there. For example, there's a ban on evictions, and I added to that when the public health emergency is lifted, that tenants will have, through their landlord, the ability to repay what they owe in installments over 12 months. So that
ah,
there would be that. And then I have another bill, which was unrelated to the pandemic, that hasn't moved. So I'm hoping maybe you and your listeners will get after the members of the council about this. It's an eviction bill. Once you have an eviction on your record, it really is like this scarlet letter, and it really prevents you from getting another good apartment, or it may make you pay more rent and that sort of thing. But a lot of these filings are in error, or when you went to court, they didn't get the eviction, or the circumstances are such that you were actually in the right, but it's on your record. So any landlord could look it up. Did anyone file for an eviction notice against you? And then there are other people who had evictions and they were evicted. This bill would say if you had an eviction, a proper one, and you were evicted, after 3 years, that has to be taken off your record. Because if you haven't had an issue in 3 years, then you ought to have
yeah,
a fresh start. And then as to those people, as to whom the filing was never sustained or was in error, that should come off immediately, just be off.
definitely.
And then I realized, well, landlords are pretty clever. Even though they may not be able to see it in the court records, they may be able to find out about it some other way. And so part of the bill also says that you cannot ask or use any eviction filing that has been erased for whatever reason. So I'm just digressing here, but in terms of evictions, we are worried. And so in this budget, even later, when there's no evictions and then you have an opportunity to pay back in installments, there are some people who still won't be able to recover. So that's when we have our emergency rent supplement will come into play. We want to keep people in their apartments, but they may need a little extra help. And so
Mhm.
that's where the emergency rent supplement can be utilized. Other people, maybe they did lose their job, but now they're working again and they will be able to, carry on. But that's a real issue, in terms of how this pandemic has hit us. And then there are lots of other issues. Like I just was able to pass a law that said a lot of the little businesses in particular that have been harmed greatly, some of them have insurance, and some of them have insurance that includes business interruption.
Ah,
And they've been filing with insurance companies and been denied. And one of the bases on which they've been denied, because everything is sort of, I don't know, chaotic, is they didn't file on time, or they didn't perfect their filing with data by a certain, like on page 157 of a 300-page insurance document, there was something. So this bill says, and I just got this one through, says that you cannot be denied your claim for insurance based solely on these timetables. They are told or suspended during the time of the pandemic. Now, what insurance companies were very worried about is making them pay business interruption insurance if your policy excluded things like pandemics. Well, they're correct. We can't go back in time and make them be responsible for that. But there are a whole host of policies that don't specify. And so these businesses ought to be able to go into court and say, this is covered under my policy. And then if the insurance company comes back and says, you didn't file it, you were 2 days late, well, that's not going to be a basis to deny, bringing their claim. So, we focused on lots of different things, to try to soften the blow. But, I understand that people are hurting. We've been very active in providing food for people, at these distribution centers, and for seniors or others who may not be able to get out. We have deliveries of food. I'm just trying to think, there've been very
students. I love the distribution of through in every ward. There's a student grocery pickup.
Right. Yes.
And I think that's so important. I love the fact that our city is really doing some amazing things. But then when you talk about developers and landlords, I see that some of the land developers are using this pandemic to play games with residents. Like I live in Ward 5, and right now I'm fighting over development, and I'm fighting against developers who want to schedule hearings and not meet with the residents and bypass the ANC, or go before the ANC before the pandemic. We're told to meet with the impacted residents, but because of the pandemic, they haven't. So they're using that to set up hearings, virtual hearings, and a lot of the information is not getting to a lot of the seniors, or if it is, many of them are not computer savvy and don't have the ability to don't know. I'm talking to seniors and they were like, I don't know anything about Zoom. I don't know how to get on a computer. Right. I don't have a computer. So I'm telling them to call your ANC, call the BZA, write a letter telling them. I've even gone and done petitions and had all the impacted residents sign, and it's been hard during a pandemic. You have to be masked, gloved with a petition. Right. You have to say, use your own ink pen, sign this. But these developers are really finding ways to really try to scapegoat doing what's right.
Well, I have a word for that. And it's not just in that area. I call it Corona opportunism. In other words, they're latching onto this and trying to, get the upper hand in certain areas where otherwise they wouldn't. So keep fighting, because we don't want that to happen. I mean, we've seen it at the national level. Some of this money that they've given out going to these big corporations,
conglomerates, yes, and
what is that about? And there's going to have to be a reckoning about all of this. Some of them, once they were identified in the press, gave the money back. But even at the council level, at some point we're going to have to ask for an accounting of the money we did get. We were shortchanged, you may remember this, by Congress. They treated us like a territory. We're the District of Columbia. And in so many other statutes, we're treated similarly to a state. But on this, and it was millions and millions of dollars. And the next version of what Congress does, at least coming out of the House, I don't know what happens when it gets to the Republicans in the Senate, will rectify that. So that will be greatly helpful to us in the district.
Definitely.
But one more reason why we need state.
Of course. And I mean, during this really important time, we've been talking about the pandemic, but one thing that has also been very prescient in this time is, the protests and the demonstrations and police reform around this time, and Black Lives Matter, and just, racial inequality in this city. Now, tell me, what's the latest on that with DC Council, as we're looking forward to making amends and making things better when it comes to that in this city?
Okay, I will answer the question, but I generally like to have a context. And what I want to say at the outset is that even though some of the things that have happened are just so terrible that you don't even want to think about them, but they have provoked us to rethink a lot of things. And that's great. And you can't do this every year, or maybe even every 5 or 10 years, but it's a wonderful opportunity that's come our way to step back and say, what the hell are we doing? You know, and to fix things, you know, that kind of went along and weren't right even when it was happening, but you know, it just kind of like went along. And I know some people are getting a little impatient or frustrated. They don't like protests. They don't like statues coming down. They don't like name changes and stuff like that. And what I suggest to them is I say, well, wait a minute. Just stop and think a minute. We're on automatic pilot on a lot of things, but they may not be good things. So seize the day and let's look at a lot of these things and see, you know, what we can change. And in terms of the police in particular, you know, the MPD, Metropolitan Police Department, um, it has improved greatly over the last number of years. I'm not saying they're saints; they're hardly saints, but you know, in handling protests and demonstrations, in you know, dealing with the citizenry and that sort of thing, there was a time, and there was a consent decree, I think, with the Justice Department, or at least a report, where there was, you know, a lot of police brutality and things of that kind. They have so improved. The number of complaints and that sort of thing is, they're actually, I won't say that they're a model, but it's a very, very good police department. Okay, so what can we do to make it better? And also to prevent violence, because we don't want to undercut law enforcement and produce another issue about violence. So what the council did, and this is just one step, it's not the end game, and it was just this budget. What the council did is it took some money, you know, if you ask me for the number, I don't know just off the top of my head, but we took some money from the police and diverted it to these other programs like violence interrupters or social service programs. But I'll tell you what, we were on this before the NEAR Act, the Neighborhood Engagement and some, it takes a public health approach to violence as opposed to, you know, a law and order approach to violence. So this is something that we have been moving toward in any event, and we enhanced it somewhat in the budget. But in terms of reimagining the police force, what we're going to do is, and this was a suggestion by Anita Bonds and Councilmember Gray, Vincent Gray, we should have a commission, which we are going to appoint, and we're going to devote money, or have devoted money to it, to actually look at what can we do to reimagine the police. For example, I've often thought, maybe like the so-called bobbies in London or whatever, we should have two divisions. We should have one division, you know, regular kind of police, they got guns and all the other stuff that they have. But then another division, police, not police officers, but rather police makers, or whatever we want to call them. And these people should not be armed. They should be in the community. They should be uniformed so that they can be identified. And they can handle many of the kinds of things that go on that we don't want armed police officer on the scene to do. You know, the whole system has to be looked at, I think, because first of all, we over criminalize. Too many things are crimes, and I'm working on some things, you know, to reduce that. Maybe we could handle them by citation, or maybe they couldn't be crimes at all. You know, the jumping turnstiles, you know, we did that, I don't know, a year or so ago. But so we over criminalize. There are too many people in jail, and we ask regular police officers to do too many things that they're really not outfitted to do, mental health and things of that nature. And so what we need to do is step back and say, what should police officers do? what should my so-called peace officers do? And how can we look at the criminal justice system and the codes to make sure that we're not like, we shouldn't be crushing people with, you know, penalties and fines and arrests and all of the rest of that. We have to think that through. So maybe I'll get to your question, but by then I will have forgotten your question.
But till then, I mean, I like the whole idea of the
yes,
officers.
yes. I like that idea a lot.
But here's the thing, and I hope as people listen to this, that don't be frustrated, don't be, you know, annoyed. You know, nobody likes, you know, change and chaos and all the rest of it. But this is a real opportunity, so we should take it and see how we can make something that's better. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, and with that, you know, it also brings up the fact that, you know, I know that there have been some protests outside the homes of the mayor and council members, including
Hey, I had two yesterday.
Oh, you did. Oh,
Yeah.
you did. That's what I was just gonna ask to see, like, yeah. So, how has that been for you? Is that like a thing, like, oh wow, we have some protesters again, or like, what's
No.
the...
Actually, the teachers came by.
Ah.
And had a caravan, maybe, I don't know, a lot of cars. And so I went out to the front steps, and, you know, they got out of their cars and we talked, and, you know, I listened to what they had to say, and it was all really kind of, I enjoyed it actually, because you know, I'm missing a lot of engagement with people anyway. And so it was a chance to do that. The second one, it struck me that it was organized to be simply confrontational, and, you know, I don't know, they didn't have the right approach, you know, they didn't want to have a conversation, you know, so these are folks who wanted to ask for more money for what is being called excluded workers. The Fiscal Policy Institute said we need 30 million extra for excluded workers. These are people who can't get unemployment insurance and who may have lost their jobs, or, you know, they're hurting for their rent, for the food and stuff. The chairman was able to cobble together, I think, something like almost half of that, almost 15 million. And maybe in the meanwhile, the reason why the Fiscal Policy Institute came up with 30 million, it was a very simplistic analysis. They said, well, there are probably about 30,000 undocumented folks, so we should give them all $1,000, add that up, that's 30 million. Well, first of all, that's, forgive me, a kind of a dumb way to do this, but in any event, not a sensible way to look at what the harms are. First of all, we don't give unemployment insurance to children, and so the 30,000 figure includes children and other people who are otherwise not working. Maybe they're you know, not capable of working. Although I don't want to say too old, because I'm going to work until the bitter end. That's my view. I like to work, but anyway. So the baseline number is not correct, and in any event, not all of those folks have lost their job anyway. So anyway, so they came here to ask for that, and oddly enough, I understand that they were led by the something called ROC, Restaurant something. Those were the folks who wanted to get the minimum wage for wait staff, you know, at restaurants. Here's a funny thing. I was the only public official who came out in favor of that. The only one in the entire district. And, you know, when they came here, it was like, rah, rah. And I said, okay. And I listened, and I did respond. It was much less cooperative and, you know, back and forth and each other. So that one I found a little, I don't know, disappointing. I'll put it that way. In any case, you know, they can come here. You know, I think they were surprised that I went out and talked to them and said, hey, let's hang out. But I don't mind. The only thing I mind is I didn't want them to block the street and make anybody mad. And you know, the horn blowing and the banging on drums and stuff. But it was early enough in the day, and my neighbors, they're very tolerant of me, so it was fine. I don't mind it, actually.
That's fine, definitely. So tell me, I realized that, there was just a vote on, LGBTQ funding here in the city. Tell me a little bit about that and where that funding would actually be going.
Well, I probably should have. Let me see if I can pull that up. I think that I would have that in my head, but I don't. Um, but as I'm looking for it, I'll mention
Mm-hmm.
something else that you all can help me with. I have a bill in, and it's been in for a while, to make insurance companies pay for this drug called PrEP.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay. So insurance companies have been refusing to pay for it because they've been saying that, well, by identifying yourself as someone who might need PrEP, you're in a high risk group and we're not going to pay for it.
Ah,
Now, there's something that's really stupid, right?
that's dumb.
Totally. You get something that actually works to prevent HIV, and yet the insurance companies are refusing to pay for it. So this bill, I don't know where it is now, but it's in someone else's committee, because if it were in my committee, it would be done with already. I don't know whose committee it is, but that ought to get out of committee and be approved by the council. If it comes to the full council will approve it. It's bottled up in somebody's committee. Okay, here we go. I pulled it up. The budget includes funding for the following LGBTQ priorities. 10 vouchers for LGBTQ seniors through the local rent supplement program, around $250,000. I don't know if my math is right on that. And the full voucher amount would comes to 1.05 million. 600,000 to fund 14 units of transitional housing for LGBTQ youth. Well over 800,000 to fund 29 units of housing supports for vulnerable residents who identify as LGBTQ. $100,000 to the Department of Aging and Community Living for dining supports for LGBTQ seniors. $67,000 to support a grant to the DC Center for the LGBTQ community, and over 400,000, I don't know the exact number, and 1 FTE to the Office of Human Rights to support the Hate Crimes Education and Coordination program. And yeah, so.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I mean, that's going to help so many LGBTQ people here. And I know a great number of our audience, do fall in that community. So thanks so much for doing that. Rayceen?
Wait, hang on 1 second though. Everybody should understand, which is why we're in a bind. Every year for the past, I don't know, maybe 8 years, it's been the case that we've had revenues that exceeded expectations.
Mm-hmm.
This year, when I was first on the council, that happened too. So I may be one of the only people left, other than the chairman, who was around when we had to cut things. This year, we were over $700 million down in our revenue for this budget year right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then over $700 million down for 21 budget, which starts in October. If you add it up, it's about $1.5 billion reduction in our revenues. The way the mayor was able to cobble together her budget, and there are cuts, she had cuts, but mostly what she did, and I get to mention something that I'm keen to mention whenever I have a chance. What she did was she relied a lot on our rainy day funds and these other funds that you have to stop me, because otherwise I just.
It's all right. I know you're passionate, and yeah. I know, and he's trying to keep us on time because we have.
No, forget the time. Okay, but we have rainy day funds and other funds that over the years we have built up and built up and built up, which is economically vital, because that's why we have a AAA bond rating. And
yeah.
That's why when when we're between people sending in their first 6 months of property tax and their next 6 months, we sometimes, that account gets kind of thin and it needs to be replenished. So we used to engage in short-term borrowing, going out to markets and borrowing money and paying interest. Now we have our own funds that we can turn to to use. So there's that benefit. But the other benefit, hello, you people who've been saying spend down those funds, hello, we have them. The reason why they're called rainy day funds is because we're going to have a rainy day.
How about that? And we
How
thank,
about that?
thank you for those rainy
A rainy
days.
day. So
And we
the
thank
mayor,
you.
the
And-
mayor relied on taking money from those funds, a lot, a good chunk. She also delayed raises for the 30-some thousand employees that we have, which is better than furloughing some. And there have been, certain cuts. And so we, unlike a lot of other places, we've been able to weather this storm pretty well. It's going to get worse, but that's why people have to understand, A, they may not have gotten all they asked for. And
How about
B,
that?
yeah, and B, maybe what they're talking about now are cuts, but they're talking about cuts now to enhancements that the council had given. So I don't know the semantics of that, but they're not actually cuts that the council. But we still need $18 million from somewhere, so we may have to do some cuts.
So we've come a long way. We got some more work to do, and we just
Yeah.
thank you for taking the time to
Hey,
tune
that
in.
sounds like you're saying goodbye to me.
Yeah,
Just about. Just about.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, any final thing you want to ask me?
no, just thank you for taking the time to give our viewers some information, some much, information is important.
Yes.
People have so many questions on their mind, and we get questions, we have questions, and just taking the time to know that we have a city that cares and people working. And if
That's the flash flood alert. That's the
Yeah,
flash
yeah.
flood alert.
everybody's getting them.
Yeah.
That's all right. And that's also our buzzer for time to go.
Thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today,
you for having me.
Councilmember. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. And to our viewers, thank you guys for watching. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.